The tape begins to spin. Check the levels. Is anyone else here? Strange, 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 strange. Found a box of Polaroids by the creek. There's a figure standing where the woods get thick.
Chapter 1. There is a certain kind of story that does not ask to be believed. It arrives with diagrams, with testimony, with half-remembered words from dead languages, with claims that are too enormous to verify and too strange to forget. It tells you that history is wrong, that science is incomplete, that every expert is either ignorant or compromised. It tells you that the world you see is only the top layer of the world that exists. And then it waits. Because the story does not need everyone to believe. It only needs the right person to say, "I knew it." In March of 1945, readers of Amazing Stories opened the magazine and found what looked, at first glance, like another lost civilization adventure. That was familiar territory. Atlantis, Lemuria, ancient machines, forgotten races, hidden chambers beneath the earth. Pulp magazines had been feasting on that material for decades. But this one was different. The story was called I Remember Lemuria. Its author was Richard Sharpe Shaver, a troubled former factory worker who claimed that what he was describing was not mere fantasy. He said he had discovered traces of a prehistoric truth buried inside language itself. He said human words contained older meanings, hidden meanings, meanings left behind by a vanished civilization. He called that original language Mantong. And then came the deeper claim. Shaver said that long ago, advanced beings had lived on Earth. They possessed technology so powerful that it could reshape bodies, influence minds, and bend the conditions of life itself. Some left the planet. Some remained below. And in the deep places of the Earth, inside immense cavern cities lit by ancient machines, their descendants still survived. Some were good. Some were not. The good ones were the teros. The bad ones were the deros. The deros were not just monsters. They were degenerate inheritors of impossible technology. They had machines that could project voices, trigger madness, cause accidents, torture people at a distance, and turn ordinary human suffering into proof of an invisible war. That pain in your skull. That voice in the night. That sudden act of cruelty. That disaster that should not have happened. For Shaver, there was an explanation. Something below was doing it. The editor of Amazing Stories, Ray Palmer, knew exactly what he had. Palmer was brilliant, shameless, curious, and commercially alert. He did not simply print Shaver's material as a normal story. He framed it as a mystery. Maybe it was fiction. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was the most important warning ever sent to the surface world. Readers answered. Some mocked it. Some hated it. Some thought it was destroying science fiction, but others wrote in with their own memories, their own voices, their own impossible experiences. They had seen lights. They had heard things. They had felt watched. They had known, somehow, that humanity was not alone on the surface of the earth. And for a few years, a science fiction magazine became something stranger than a magazine. It became a clearinghouse for buried worlds, persecution machines, psychic attacks, lost continents, hidden languages, and people who believed that the story explained them. That is the part that makes the Shaver mystery hard to dismiss. Not because it was literally true. There is no evidence that deros live below us, operating ancient Lemurian machinery from underground cities. But there is something real in the way the story spread. There is something real in the hunger for it. The Shaver mystery arrived at the end of a world war, just as humanity had proven it could build secret weapons, destroy cities, and turn science into apocalypse. If the official world could contain the atom bomb, death camps, radar, rockets, and classified military projects, then what else might it contain? And if modern life felt haunted, if the mind itself felt invaded, If cruelty seemed too organized to be random, then maybe the horror was not inside us. Maybe it was underneath us. This is the danger zone where pulp fiction becomes belief. Where editorial hype meets private trauma. Where mental illness, mythology, and conspiracy merge into something sticky and powerful. Where the reader is not just entertained, but recruited. Because the Shaver mystery was never only about caves. It was about the idea that reality had a basement. It was about the belief that the wrongness of the world had an address. And it was about one man who said he remembered what had been hidden, and one editor who decided America should hear him. This is strAInge, and tonight, we're looking at the Shaver mysteries. Chapter 2, The Man Who Remembered Lemuria. Richard Sharpe Shaver did not come to the world like a polished prophet. He came through factories, odd jobs, private suffering, and a mind that kept finding patterns where other people saw only noise. He had worked around machines, and that matters. His hidden universe was not made of ghosts. It was made of engines, rays, screens, buried chambers, and ancient devices still humming in the dark. Before the deros, before the caves, before amazing stories made him famous, Shaver believed he had discovered a lost original language. He called it Mantong. To him, ordinary words were not ordinary at all. They were broken pieces of a much older speech, left behind by a forgotten civilization. If you split the sounds apart correctly, you could uncover secret meanings buried inside language itself. As scholarship, Mantong did not work. It was not real linguistics. But as revelation, it had power. It made the world feel coded. Names became clues. Sounds became fossils. Coincidences became messages. Shaver was not saying he had invented a fantasy. He was saying the truth had been hidden in plain sight, and that he had learned how to read it. He sent these ideas to Amazing Stories, where editor Ray Palmer saw something electric. Palmer understood pulp readers. He knew they loved lost worlds, ancient races, and impossible machines. But Shaver's material had something extra. It had the dangerous tone of testimony. Shaver was not just writing about Lemuria. He claimed he remembered it. Palmer reshaped Shaver's material into I Remember Lemuria, and published it in 1945. The title did half the work. It promised adventure, but it also made an intimate claim. Not the secret of Lemuria. Not the caverns beneath Earth. I remember. That changed everything. A story entertains you. A memory asks you to believe. In Shaver's version of history, humanity lived on top of a buried ruin. Long before recorded civilization, advanced beings had built vast underground cities and filled them with machines capable of healing, controlling minds, projecting voices, and shaping life itself. Most of those beings eventually left Earth, but they abandoned their cities and their technology beneath the surface. The survivors split into two groups. The teros were decent, still sane, still capable of pity. The deros were corrupted, degenerate, and cruel. They had inherited the old machines but not the wisdom to use them. From below, they tormented surface humanity. They caused accidents. They sent voices into people's minds. They spread sickness, fear, confusion, and madness. That was the hook. The Shaver mystery did not merely offer monsters. It offered an explanation. If you heard a voice, if you felt watched, if your life seemed manipulated by something unseen, Shaver gave that feeling a name. The deros were doing it. Your pain was not random. It came from somewhere. There was an enemy beneath the floor. That is why the story caught fire. Some readers mocked it. Some hated it. Some thought Palmer had disgraced science fiction. But others wrote in to say they understood. They had heard things too. They had seen things. They had always suspected the world was being interfered with by hidden forces. Shaver had given their fear a structure. This is the uneasy center of the Shaver mystery. It was absurd, but it was not empty. It was pulp fiction wrapped around real distress. Palmer may have shaped it, sold it, and exploited it, but Shaver seems to have believed in the world he described. That makes it harder than a simple hoax. It was not just a trick. It was belief turned into entertainment, and entertainment turned back into belief. By 1945, America was ready for that kind of nightmare. The world had just learned what secret weapons, hidden laboratories, and modern machines could do. Technology no longer felt purely hopeful. It had teeth. So when Shaver said ancient machines were operating underground, ruining human lives from the shadows, some readers did not laugh. They leaned closer. Chapter 3: Ray Palmer opens the door. Ray Palmer was exactly the wrong editor for a quiet controversy, which means he was exactly the right editor for the Shaver mystery. He did not see a pulp magazine as a sealed container for stories. He saw it as a machine for excitement. A magazine could publish fiction, yes, but it could also provoke letters, arguments, clubs, theories, loyalties, and feuds. Palmer understood that readers did not only want to be entertained. They wanted to feel included in something. That made Richard Shaver's material irresistible. A normal Lost World adventure begins and ends on the page. Shaver's story did not. It claimed that the page was only the beginning. If Lemuria had existed, if the deros were real, if machines under the earth were interfering with human minds, then every reader suddenly had a role. Their nightmares, headaches, accidents, strange memories, and private fears might be evidence. Palmer knew how powerful that was. He did not present I Remember Lemuria as just another fantasy tale. He framed it as a mystery. Maybe it was fiction. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was a warning from a man who had somehow seen beneath the skin of the world. That uncertainty was the hook. Proof would have ended the game. Possibility kept it alive. The readers responded hard. Some were furious. They thought Palmer had embarrassed science fiction by dragging it into occultism, paranoia, and crank revelation. These were fans who wanted rockets, engineering, serious speculation, and respectability. They did not want underground degenerates with ancient ray machines whispering into people's minds. But others wrote back with recognition. They said they had heard voices. They had felt invisible pressure. They had seen lights, sensed hidden forces, or known all along that something was wrong beneath ordinary life. Shaver had given their fear a vocabulary. Teros. Deros. Mantong. Lemuria. The words sounded ridiculous to outsiders, but to believers they felt like names for things they had already experienced. That was the feedback loop. Shaver supplied the mythology. Palmer supplied the audience. The audience supplied testimony. Then the testimony made the mythology feel larger than one man's imagination. Every letter made the hidden world seem more crowded. Every witness made the fiction feel less fictional. The Shaver mystery stopped belonging only to Shaver. It became a shared system. This is where Palmer becomes difficult. He was brilliant, but he was also reckless. He knew controversy sold magazines. He knew that printing these claims as possible truth would keep readers arguing. He also knew, or should have known, that some of the people writing to him were not playing a game. For them, the voices and persecutions were not entertainment. They were daily life. And yet Palmer was not simply a sneering fraud. He had his own deep attraction to strange testimony. Later, he would help shape early UFO culture, and the method would feel familiar: collect reports, challenge official explanations, invite readers to wonder whether the impossible was not impossible after all. Palmer's true subject was the borderland between story and belief. That borderland is dangerous because it flatters the reader. It says the experts are blind, the authorities are hiding things, and ordinary people may know the truth before science catches up. Sometimes that instinct is useful. Institutions do lie. History does bury things. But the same instinct can become a trap. Once disbelief becomes evidence of suppression, the mystery can protect itself from almost anything. The Shaver mystery thrived because of that protection. If scientists rejected it, they were narrow-minded. If fans mocked it, they were afraid. If no one found the caves were hidden better than expected. If the deros seemed impossible, that only proved their technology was beyond us. Palmer opened the door. After that, he could not control what came through. Believers came. Skeptics came. Lonely people came. Angry fans came. People in pain came. For a few strange years, Amazing Stories became less like a magazine and more like a switchboard for impossible testimony. Shaver created the underworld, but Palmer gave it a public. And once a nightmare has a public, it can start defending itself. Chapter 4: The Deros Beneath Us. The deros are the reason the Shaver mystery survives. Lemuria gives the mythology its ancient grandeur, Mantong gives it a code, and Ray Palmer gives it an audience. But the deros give it fear. They are the thing people remember, because they turn the whole idea from lost world fantasy into personal horror. In Shaver's mythology, the deros were not demons, though they often behave like them. They were not aliens in the later flying saucer sense. They were descendants of the ancient underground people, damaged by time, radiation, isolation, and moral collapse. They inherited impossible machines from a greater civilization, but they had become too twisted to use them wisely. That is one of the most disturbing parts of the concept. The deros are not powerful because they are superior. They are powerful because they are squatters in the ruins of something superior. They are children playing with weapons built by gods. The machines are magnificent. The operators are degraded, cruel, bored, and insane. From below, Shaver said, the deros interfered with surface life. They had rays that could project thoughts into human minds. They could create voices, compulsions, violent urges, nightmares, hallucinations, and accidents. They could torture at a distance. They could make people sick. They could drive people into conflict and then enjoy the results. They did not need to invade the surface, because they could poison it invisibly. This made them different from ordinary pulp monsters. A monster with claws attacks the body. A dero attacks interpretation. Once you believe in them, every bad thing can be reread. A headache is not a headache. A nightmare is not a nightmare. A cruel impulse is not just human weakness. The world becomes filled with signals from below, and the believer becomes an unwilling detective of his own suffering. That is why the Shaver mystery could feel so persuasive to the people who needed it. It made pain legible. It gave chaos an author. Human life is full of bad luck, mental distress, random violence, illness, humiliation, and grief. Most of the time, there is no single villain behind it. Shaver offered one. The deros were the hidden engineers of misery. There is a deep post-war terror inside that idea. The 1940s had shown ordinary people that technology could be secret, vast, and catastrophic. A machine built somewhere unseen could change the fate of cities. A government project could exist in silence until the moment it exploded into history. In that world, ancient hidden machines did not sound quite as childish as they might have before. But the deros were also intimate. They did not only threaten nations. They entered bedrooms, dreams, skulls, marriages, factories, streets, and private moments of panic. They made conspiracy domestic. The battlefield was not just underground. It was inside the mind. Every person could become a target. Every person could also become a receiver. This is where the horror turns sad. Because when Shaver described voices, invisible torment, and manipulation from hidden enemies, he was also describing experiences that resemble serious psychological distress. The deros gave those experiences a mythology. They moved the source of torment from the mind into the world. That may have made the suffering easier to explain, but it also made it harder to escape. Ray Palmer's magazine then amplified the effect. Once readers wrote in to say they had experienced similar things, the deros became social. A private terror became a shared map. People who felt isolated by strange experiences could now imagine themselves as witnesses in a hidden war. They were not alone. They were being attacked. That is the terrible gift of the deros. They provide companionship through persecution. They say, your fear is real. Your enemy is real. Your suffering matters. For some readers, that must have felt like relief. For others, it may have pulled them deeper into the dark. And this is why the Shaver mystery is more than a goofy footnote in science fiction history. It is a prototype for a modern kind of fear. The belief that unseen forces are manipulating thought, health, history, and society did not end with Shaver. It simply changed costumes. Mind control beams became satellites. Cavern machines became government programs. Deros became elites, aliens, algorithms, or secret networks. The cave stayed the same. Only the names changed. Chapter 5: The Readers Look Down. The Shaver mystery did not become famous only because Richard Shaver believed it, or because Ray Palmer knew how to sell it. It became famous because readers answered. That is the part that turns the story from one man's private universe into a cultural event. A strange manuscript is one thing. A strange manuscript surrounded by thousands of responses is something else. When I Remember Lemuria appeared, many readers treated it as fiction and nothing more. They had seen lost continents before. They had read about Atlantis, hidden races, ancient machines, and secret histories. Science fiction and fantasy had already built entire cities under the earth. In that sense, Shaver was not inventing the ingredients. He was changing the temperature. The difference was the invitation. Palmer did not simply ask readers whether they enjoyed the story. He asked, directly or indirectly, whether they recognized it. That changed the relationship between magazine and audience. The reader was no longer only a spectator. The reader could become a witness. The reader could write in and say, "This happened to me too." And they did. Some wrote to denounce the whole thing as nonsense. Others wrote with their own accounts of voices, lights, dreams, tunnels, strange memories, and invisible attacks. They had felt watched. They had felt controlled. They had sensed interference in their thoughts. Now, suddenly, there was a language for that interference. The Shaver mystery gave them a framework, and frameworks are powerful things. Once a framework exists, experience begins to arrange itself around it. A nightmare becomes a dero attack. A sudden illness becomes a ray. A moment of despair becomes evidence of manipulation. Even skepticism becomes part of the pattern, because the believer can say, "Of course they want you to laugh." That is how they keep the truth buried. This is how a mystery protects itself. It does not need to prove every claim. It only needs to teach people how to reinterpret the ordinary. That is why the Shaver material could expand so quickly. It did not require a reader to travel to Lemuria or find a cavern entrance. It told them the evidence might already be inside their own life. For science fiction fandom, this was alarming. Fans were trying to build a future for the genre. They wanted better writing, better science, and more respect. They wanted editors and outsiders to understand that science fiction was not merely trash for adolescent boys. Then Palmer filled the magazine with deros, Mantong, underground torture machines, and letters from people who seemed to believe every word. To those fans, the Shaver mystery was embarrassing. Worse, it was dangerous. It blurred the line between imagination and delusion at exactly the moment when science fiction was trying to claim intellectual seriousness. The genre wanted to be a laboratory of ideas. Palmer had turned it into a séance with a circulation department. But Palmer understood something the respectability campaign missed. People do not come to weird stories only for rational speculation. They come for the shiver of possibility. They come for the feeling that the walls are thinner than they look. They come because the official world is often too small to contain their fear. That does not make the Shaver mystery true. It does explain why truth was not the only thing at stake. For believers, the question was not whether a scientist could verify Lemurian machines. The question was whether the story explained a feeling they already had. The feeling came first. The mythology came after. This is the emotional engine of many conspiracies. They begin with a wound, a suspicion, a humiliation, a loss, or a terror that has no satisfying explanation. Then a story arrives that gives the wound a cause. It says, "You were not confused. You were not unlucky. You were not broken. You were targeted. That is a frightening message, but also a seductive one. The Shaver mystery told readers that their private suffering belonged to a cosmic war. It made them important. It made them witnesses. It made their pain meaningful. And once pain becomes meaningful, people will defend the meaning fiercely, because losing the story can feel like losing the only explanation they ever had. That is why the letters mattered so much. Each one turned the lonely believer into part of a hidden community. Somewhere out there, someone else had heard the voices. Someone else had felt the rays. Someone else had seen the signs. The magazine became a meeting place for people who believed the world had a basement and that something terrible was alive down there. In the end, the readers did more than respond to the Shaver mystery. They completed it. Shaver gave them the underworld. Palmer gave them the stage. But the readers gave the mystery its echo, and in fringe belief, echo can feel very much like proof. Chapter 6: The Fans' Revolt. Not everyone wanted to look down. To many science fiction fans, the Shaver mystery was not exciting. It was humiliating. They had spent years arguing that science fiction was more than trash, more than monsters, more than impossible machines thrown across cheap paper. They wanted the genre to grow up. They wanted better science, better writing, and a future that could be taken seriously. Then Ray Palmer filled amazing stories with deros. To the believers, the Shaver material was revelation. To the hostile fans, it was poison. It made science fiction look gullible, childish, and unstable. Worse, it blurred the boundary between imagining strange things and claiming strange things as fact. The fans could accept underground civilizations as fiction. What they hated was the wink that said, maybe this is true. That was the real scandal. It was not merely that Shaver's mythology was bizarre. Pulp readers were used to bizarre. The scandal was that Palmer encouraged readers to test the story against their own lives. A tale about hidden caverns became a possible explanation for voices, breakdowns, accidents, and mental suffering. For some fans, that crossed a moral line. The backlash grew bitter. Science fiction fandom has always loved arguments, and the Shaver mystery gave it a perfect battlefield. On one side were readers who wanted wonder without restraint, who believed the universe might be stranger than official science allowed. On the other side were fans who feared that Palmer was turning their genre into a shelter for delusion. Both sides understood something real. The skeptics were right that the Shaver mystery could be dangerous. It offered a closed system where doubt became proof and suffering became evidence of attack. A person already frightened by invisible forces might not be helped by a magazine telling them those forces had names, machines, and underground headquarters. But the believers were responding to something real too. Not real deros, but real alienation. Real fear. Real distrust. Real experiences they could not explain. The respectable fans wanted to protect science fiction from madness. The believers wanted a story big enough to hold the madness they already felt. That tension never fully went away. It is still with us whenever weird culture touches conspiracy. It is still there whenever entertainment borrows the language of secret truth. Just asking questions can be a playful invitation, or it can be a trapdoor. It depends on who is listening, and what they need the answer to be. Ray Palmer had opened that trapdoor. The fans could yell, mock, condemn, and organize against it, but they could not make it disappear. The Shaver mystery had already proved that there was an audience for fiction that behaved like evidence. It had shown that a magazine could become a meeting place for people who did not merely want stories about hidden worlds. They wanted confirmation that the hidden world had already touched them. Chapter 7: The Sources Arrive. The Shaver mystery did not end in the caves. It rose into the sky. That sounds backwards, but it is the natural next step. Once you have accepted ancient machines, hidden civilizations, suppressed history, and beings who manipulate humanity from outside ordinary sight, the direction almost does not matter. Underground and outer space become two versions of the same idea. Somewhere close, but unreachable, there are intelligences with better technology and secret intentions. In 1947, the flying saucer age began in earnest after Kenneth Arnold reported seeing strange objects moving near Mount Rainier. Soon the newspapers were full of saucers, discs, mystery craft, military denials, panicked witnesses, and experts explaining things away. America had a new shape for the unknown. Before long, the hidden world did not have to be under your feet. It could be above your roof. Ray Palmer was ready for it. The same instincts that made him seize on Shaver made him perfect for the UFO moment. He understood testimony. He understood that witnesses were more compelling than lectures. He understood that uncertainty could sell better than certainty. Most of all, he understood the strange thrill of asking whether ordinary people had seen something that official power refused to admit. The Shaver mystery helped prepare the ground. It trained readers to think in a certain way. Maybe myths preserved real history. Maybe strange experiences were not hallucinations. Maybe modern science was arrogant. Maybe the government knew more than it said. Maybe the person everyone laughed at was actually the first one to see the truth. That is the emotional grammar of UFO culture. It is also the grammar of Shaver. The objects changed, but the sentence stayed the same. For Shaver himself, flying saucers could fit easily into the larger mythology. If ancient beings had left Earth, then perhaps some of the craft in the sky belonged to them. If hidden races still lived below, perhaps they had machines that could fly. If the surface world was only one layer of reality, then lights in the sky might be doors, patrols, warnings, or tricks. The saucers made the mystery more modern. Deros in caverns felt old, almost gothic. Flying discs felt atomic, military, technological, immediate. They belonged to radar, test pilots, air bases, secret projects, and Cold War fear. But both ideas fed the same hunger. They promised that behind the official world was another world with better machines and darker motives. This is where Palmer's legacy becomes enormous. He did not create every later conspiracy, and he did not invent UFO belief by himself. But he helped build a method of presentation that would echo for decades. Collect the strange reports. Print the witness accounts, ask questions with a raised eyebrow. Leave enough room for denial, but never enough room for dismissal. Let the reader feel smarter than the expert. That last part is crucial. The Shaver mystery and early saucer culture both offered readers a promotion. You were not just a fan. You were an investigator. You were not merely reading weird stories. You were reviewing evidence. The magazine became a file cabinet. The letters page became a tribunal. The editor became a guide through forbidden material. And once readers had learned that posture, they could carry it anywhere. Caves, saucers, lost continents, psychic powers, secret weapons, government cover-ups, ancient astronauts. Each new mystery could be plugged into the same machine. Official denial did not stop the machine. It powered it. That is why the Shaver mystery matters beyond its own absurd details. Deros may seem silly now, with their underground ray devices and degenerate cruelty, but the structure around them is completely familiar. A witness speaks. An editor amplifies. A community forms. Skeptics attack. Believers take the attack as proof. The story mutates and survives. By the end of the 1940s, the Great American Weird had changed altitude. The basement was still there, but now the attic was haunted too. The hidden masters might live below, above, or somewhere outside normal space entirely. What mattered was not the address. What mattered was the conviction that the surface of reality was lying. Shaver gave that conviction a cave. The saucers gave it a sky. Chapter 8, After the Boom. The Shaver mystery did not vanish all at once. It faded, mutated, and went looking for smaller rooms. For a few years, it had been loud. It had taken over space in amazing stories, pulled in letters, enraged fans, thrilled believers, and made Richard Shaver a strange kind of pulp prophet. But no magazine controversy can stay white-hot forever. The backlash was real. The embarrassment was real. And eventually, even Ray Palmer had to move on from the exact formula that had made the mystery explode. That did not mean Palmer abandoned the borderland. Flying saucers, psychic claims, hidden histories, fringe science, all of it belonged to the same emotional landscape. Palmer understood that the Shaver mystery was not only about deros. The audience had shown him something important. People wanted stories that came dressed as evidence. Shaver kept going too, but his path grew stranger and quieter. The caves remained part of him, but later in life he became obsessed with what he called rock books. He believed that certain stones contained ancient images, writings, and records from the lost world. Agates, slices of rock, patterns in mineral color and shape. To Shaver, these were not random formations. They were archives. This is one of the saddest and most fascinating turns in the whole story. The underground civilization had become portable. You no longer had to find a cavern entrance or decode a hidden language. The proof could be in your hand, inside a stone, waiting for the right person to see it. What most people would call pattern, Shaver called message. Skeptics would say this was pareidolia, the mind's habit of finding faces, bodies, figures, and symbols in random shapes. We see animals in clouds, saints in stains, eyes in wood grain, cities in cracked paint. The human brain is built to find meaning, even when meaning is not there. But to Shaver, that explanation would have sounded like another refusal to look. There is something almost tender in his rock books. The deros are ugly, violent, and paranoid. The rock books are different. They feel like the work of a man trying to prove that the universe had left him records, that the past was still speaking, that history had not been destroyed but hidden in matter itself. The stone was not silent. The viewer was simply untrained. This was Shaver's permanent position. He was always trying to teach people how to see. See the buried language inside words. See the ancient machines behind suffering. See the hidden images inside stones. See that the official world was only a failed reading of a much larger text. That is why he could never fully return to ordinary authorship. A writer can finish a story. A witness cannot finish witnessing. If Shaver had only invented Lemuria, he could have moved on to the next invention. But if he believed he had discovered something real, then every new sign mattered. Every image in stone, every strange experience, every reader's letter, every coincidence became another fragment of the same buried record. The tragedy is that the world did not need the record as badly as he did. Science fiction moved on. UFO culture moved upward. Conspiracy culture found new villains, new technologies, new maps. Shaver remained attached to his caverns, his language, his rocks, and his impossible memory. But fringe ideas rarely die cleanly. They shed their names and keep their shapes. The deros did not remain famous in the way Dracula or Frankenstein remained famous. They became more like a buried ancestor of later fears. You can hear them in stories of mind control beams, secret underground bases, alien manipulation, electronic harassment, and invisible persecution. The vocabulary changes, but the emotional architecture remains. That is Shaver's afterlife. Not mass belief in Lemuria. Not actual deros waiting in caverns. His afterlife is the structure of the suspicion. The idea that human suffering is being managed from somewhere just out of reach. That ordinary reality is a cover story. That the truth is physically close, almost touchable, but blocked by ridicule, experts, and the blindness of everyone who refuses to see. By the time Shaver died in 1975, the world had changed around him. The saucers had become bigger than the caves. The Cold War had given conspiracy a new vocabulary. Secret government programs, radiation experiments, surveillance, psychological warfare, and classified technology were no longer pulp inventions. Some were real. That made the impossible easier to protect. A believer could always point to the actual secrets and ask why this secret, too, could not be true. That is the door Palmer opened and Shaver walked through. Once the public learns that official reality can hide terrible things, the border between healthy suspicion and totalizing paranoia becomes thin. The Shaver mystery lived on that border. It was wrong in its facts, but it understood the mood before many respectable people did. Chapter 9: What the Mystery Became. The Shaver mystery was wrong about the earth, but it was not wrong about fear. There were no deros operating ancient machines beneath the surface. There is no evidence for Lemurian caverns, hidden torture rays, or underground beings causing madness and disaster. But the emotional shape of the story survived because it answered a feeling people already had, that something unseen was interfering with their lives. That feeling did not go away. It modernized. In Shaver's world, the hidden machine was underground. Later, it became flying saucers, secret bases, mind control programs, satellites, surveillance systems, and algorithms. The names changed, but the structure stayed familiar. There is a hidden operator. There is a machine. There is a reason your suffering is not random. That is the dangerous comfort of conspiracy. It turns pain into evidence. It gives fear a villain. It says, you are not confused. You are not unlucky. You are not alone. You are being targeted. For someone already frightened or isolated, that can feel like rescue. It can also become a trap. Ray Palmer understood the power of that trap. He knew how to keep a story balanced between fiction and revelation. He knew that a question mark could be more powerful than proof. Maybe Shaver was wrong. Maybe he was mad. Maybe he remembered something. Maybe the reader had experienced it too. That maybe is the engine. It is still everywhere, in podcasts, forums, videos, leaked documents, timelines, screenshots, and threads. Here are the anomalies. Here are the witnesses. Here is what they do not want you to ask. Curiosity is not the problem. Official stories should be questioned. Real cover-ups do happen. The danger begins when a theory becomes impossible to disprove. That was the Shaver trap. If evidence appeared, it confirmed the mystery. If evidence did not appear, that proved the truth was hidden. If skeptics laughed, they were blind or influenced. Once a story can explain both proof and the absence of proof, it becomes almost impossible to escape. And yet, the Shaver mystery is not only ridiculous. It is sad, strange, and deeply human. Richard Shaver built a mythology out of language, machines, memory, and suffering. Ray Palmer gave it an audience. The readers gave it an echo. Together, they created one of the great American fringe legends. The deros were not real. But the need for deros was real. That is what remains after the cave's collapse, the suspicion that the surface is lying, that pain has hidden authors, and that somewhere, just out of sight, someone is operating the machine. This has been strAInge. Next time, we leave the caverns and head into the fields, forests, moors, and motorway edges of the United Kingdom, where something large, black, and impossible keeps appearing in the headlights. Next episode, we're looking at British big cats.
The tape begins to spin. Check the levels. Is anyone else here? Strange, strange. Found a box of Polaroids by the creek. There's a figure standing where the woods get thick. The local paper says he went missing back in May, but in the shot he's looking right my way. The green is heavy and the light is low. He's wearing clothes that